We are live on the YouTubes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of, maybe not ongoing, our reading of, probably just reading of for this, Klossowski's Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle. We're going to be continuing further into Chapter 6 as we make our way into understanding science and make a move from, I don't know how I'd put it, I'd probably say, we'll be moving from epistemology to ontology very quickly, and simulation and all the fun little words that sort of go with everything we've been talking about. If you are unmuted, I would ask you to mute just because we don't get random little gasps here and there. Because if you do want to gasp, please do. I will absolutely happily take interruptions and questions, but because I do stop for all the noises. Okay. We're looking right now at the final scene of the last piece, the last pages we've been reading, the last week's reading. And it's this last little bit here at the very end. The philosopher imposter knows what he must hold on to in this crucial point, this limit point, at which his own intention of producing simulacra from the phantasm of the impulses coincides with the activity of the scientist. And the setup we're talking about at a basic level is the introduction of the way that simulacra work. I talked about this a little bit last week, but this is what the scientist mostly does, secretly, I think would be the phrase we would talk about it. He produces simulacra. These are models, measurements, calculations, ways of understanding the world that are, we would probably more refer to them colloquially as abstract, but they are abstract rules and measurements of the world. Say things like a tree grows in this particular format and upwards, and then it does this, and here's how the cell structure works, and it's these things, and these cells walk energy back and forth from other parts of the cell, and these molecules do this, and like the models of things, and this could be gravity or magnetism, or doesn't matter. Like all of this stuff is what a scientist does, and these are simulacra. The reconstitution of processes into abstract formal systems. The imposter philosopher, as I don't want to say a counter to this because that makes it seem like they're more coextensive, and they are not, and it's not done directly to counter it, but it is doing somewhat of the same thing, but instead with the drives obsessional images themselves. That's what Nietzsche is doing, more or less, or Nietzsche's talking about here, right? So the simulacra in this case, rather than being built and modeled from things that can impose form on flux, that can impose form on change, that can impose form on becoming, he instead is focused on producing simulacra, and hit the words here, from the phantasms of the impulses. These are willed images out of the drives. At the limit of things, these two coincide. They're very much the same images, the same simulacra, not images, same simulacra at this sort of limit point of what they're talking about here. And so Klossowski is from here going to be talking through more or less how this functions, how these things come to be, and how they're sort of set up. That's where I have us as we're setting out. So we're going to move on. We're in, if you have a copy, it's page 138. This stuff gets really fun because I know a lot of people here are into science programming and have a very decent grasp of these things. This is a very fun section to have that, because we're going to be talking about things that I think we can all relate to a little bit more, especially in our sort of hyper-technical world. But let's find out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just talking out my ass. So let's give it a read, see what we can do. That fits. Good. Since simulation is the attribute of being itself, it also becomes the very principle of knowledge. like every impulse that interprets its phantasms as a condition of existence, that is to say, as a means of dominating, of appropriating for itself a power over what resists it. Science itself, when it comes into contact with a given phenomenon, is interpreting its own phantasms. It invents simulacra that conform to these phantasms, and always in terms of the same schemes of stable unities that constitute every semiotic. Simulacra through which the human mind does not so much comprehend as mime the behavior of what is foreign to it by nature. It assimilates the latter only by reconstituting the processes that science examines at the level of efficacy. But the latter corresponds to the sempiternal, that probably isn't the right word there. I'll take a second and find out. Sempiternal anthropomorphic superstition, according to which the mind cannot tolerate that there be an absence of a reason, if not of intention, at the origin of a phenomenon. Now, although science admits in principle that there is no intention at the origin of a given process, once it reconstitutes this process, it nonetheless introduces an intention into the process through the very act of reproducing it. The reconstituted process can be reconstituted only through the simulacra of unities, that is, through a calculus that verifies them. But it is through the simulacrum, calculating the process, that the intention of the knower intervenes, which is one of efficacy. So this is really good, like philosophy of science shit, by the way, like super good philosophy of science shit. If you're not paying attention, you're missing out. It's gold. I'm gonna make sure. Yeah, still nobody from YouTube. All right, so be it. So be it. I should fucking get used to that. That's fine. So let's go bit by bit, and we'll make our way sort of from top on in, as we always do, one at a bit. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask, to type it out. Typing out's always the easiest to get through, even if it may not seem like it with 92 in there. Wow, this is just like chapter 1. Exactly 92. Exactly. It actually very much is like chapter 1. But don't hesitate to ask questions. Always the good stuff. Always good. We'll start. Since simulation is the attribute of being itself, it also becomes the very principle of knowledge. Okay, so this is setting us up in a very particular direction. We've talked about at this point, and he's set up, I think, fairly well, so I'm not going to kind of relitigate it. But the idea is reality doesn't have an underlying true form, the reality principle we've been talking a lot about. It's Freud's idea, carried forward in a lot of other thinking, sort of as a thing, okay? It's a thing he spent a lot of time on the last little bit. But reality doesn't have this, like, singular truth or a particular form. And it's not that is then copied badly. That's not the thing a simulacrum is. Pretending to be is the thing reality is doing. It is the pretense of being. Right? That's the action of what the real is. It is pretending to be. So in that case, and that's what it's saying here, since simulation is the attribute of being itself, it also becomes the very principle of knowledge. As such, with that, it would logically carry that knowledge itself, knowledge which is about reality, knowledge of what things are, itself can't be anything more also than pretending to be, like fundamentally, more or less. And for those who are joining who are fresh, this is not simulation or simulacra in the Baudrillardian sense. This is, we're using it very much in the Platonic sense, actually. Deleuze and Klossowski both borrowed directly from Plato the idea of simulacrum. This is not something that fakes what is real. The simulacrum of the gods were vessels that the gods could carry to enter into reality. They were statues quite often, the simulacrum. it's not about a real thing that's faked. It's the mode of appearing as, when there's no thing original behind that appearance, right? And this is pulling from a lot of different places, but that's like the very basic thing. Not super exciting, I know, but it's basic. No, erase. There you go. No, there. Let's go back to this. All right. Like every impulse that interprets its phantasms as a condition of existence, that is to say, as a means of dominating, of appropriating for itself a power over what resists it, science itself, when it comes into contact with a given phenomenon, is interpreting its own phantasms. The machinery of things is kind of what Klossowski is bringing out here, if that makes sense. Right? He's kind of going through the basic sort of, I don't know, setup we're talking through here. Is the impulse gives way to phantasm, gives way to simulacrum, and each of these is sort of set up. So how to phrase it? I haven't had enough caffeine today. The phantasm is the interior, mute, unwilled impulses that the image that is generated by the impulses. The simulacrum is exteriorized. It is necessarily communicable. It is a thing that can be shared or willed. Every simulacrum fundamentally has to betray its phantasm. And it's the only way of anything of the phantasm ever becoming a thing. Otherwise, the phantasm stays in its position and it kind of never is communicated and also doesn't get, around. Again, there's a will, a push, a force behind this. And that's a lot of what he's sort of laying into. So the phrasing he opens with, like every impulse that interprets its phantasms as a condition of existence, the impulse sees the phantasm. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't identify it, but it is seemingly the next thing, the condition of existence. This is life promoting. Nietzsche has a concept called the will to truth. And people misunderstand this. They think it is a desire to actually get at the truth. And it's not. It's a will to impose the truth. It is a will to truth, truthiness, the truthness of a thing. And as such, for Nietzsche, the falseness of any single judgment is not actually an objection to it. It has nothing to do with whether it's true or false, right? The question is, how far is this statement promoting life, preserving the herd, preserving the species? He talks about the logical fictions that we have and we exist with, the number of things, just the idea of that there are a number of things. I have two eyes, just the idea of numbers as a thing, the idea of identity, right? All of these things. We couldn't exist in complex social groups without it. It's a thing that makes it very much a survival, longer term, life promoting, all of that stuff. This is a big deal for Nietzsche as he's sort of phrasing. But with that comes sort of the second bit, because the impulse that interprets this phantasm condition of existence as a means of dominating, of appropriating for itself a power over what resists it. There's an odd double play here. I'm going to try to see if I can, because he's kind of doing two things. On one side, we're talking about the phantasm as this condition of existence, right? And he's pulling that and converting that into a more biological claim. The way that an organism keeps itself alive. That this error is the thing that keeps it alive, right? Because the second part of that, and it's kind of the point of this sentence, as I read it, is the power claim, the means as a means of dominating. All events that exist in the world of the organic are about overpowering. It's a becoming master. It's every overpowering itself is a fresh interpretation of whatever is coming. It's a fresh interpretation of the now. Interpretation is domination. There's no such thing as a neutral reading. There's no, oh, the impulse is just happen to read and interpret. No. Science just happens to interpret. No. It's a matter of holding and controlling and exercising oneself over space, right? And so when we talk about, and when he says the rest, science itself, when it comes into contact with a given phenomenon, is interpreting its own phantasms. Normally when we say interpret, we're talking about like getting to the truth, trying to understand what a thing really is, trying to get something right. And this is not it. It is interpretation. Can translation and interpretation ever be different? Yes, Arachne. Actually, that's probably the smarter way to juxtapose it. Let me finish the thought, though. If you interpret, you're imposing a form on resistance. Translation is something that is open to being translated, and it is the sort of back and forth, or the idea of exchange from one thing to another. There may be something lost. We don't consider it as such. We don't think about it as such as we go through it. There is, for sure. Interpretation is on the thing that is itself resisting interpretation. There's a difference there. Translation is something about translating from like to like, generally speaking. And again, as he talks about it, it's very much about that sort of shift in how we talk about it. So here he says at the end, when it comes into contact with a phenomenon, science is interpreting its own phantasm. Science is not meeting objects or some objective space. That's not what science is interpreting. That's not what science is doing. Science is not a neutral entity out in the world. It is meeting its own impulsional images, and it's mistaking them for object, for objective thing. Okay? Arachne says, so interpretation could be, this is what this actually is, whereas this could be exchanged with this. More or less, yes. Interpretation is where we are, like, I mean, we're taking, well, let's talk through it how he means it. Scientist comes on something, and they're like, oh, I'm going to learn what this is. I'm going to interpret these signals of various measurements, and I'm going to put them in a thing. It is not neutral. I mean, this is, again, Latour does this extremely well and goes through this in Laboratory Life brilliantly. But this is stating it in that very plain, like, French theory style, where it's like, actually what's happening is the scientist is dealing with his own phantasms and interpreting those. He's interpreting those. It's the interpretation of the interpreter's phantasms. It's not just that science is one perspective amongst many possible perspectives. That's more Nietzsche's direct claim when he writes about this, and it's Beyond Good and Evil and Gay Science, all of that. He writes about this stuff really nicely. But Klossowski's taking it a step further with Nietzsche's attempts to try to make a scientific explanation of the eternal return and how he did it, that the science itself, again, instead of being one perspective amongst many possible ones, is instead originating in impulsional life, just like all life, and it's of the scientist themselves, not the phenomenon. Science is the scientist exercising science onto the world, from his impulsional to his phantasms, building simulacra. So this is less perspectivism and more Freudian projection, you could even say. Like it's more about how the person is, the scientist is dealing with these things, how the scientist is viewing these elements and how they're handling it. Because again, it's their impulsion to phantasm, to simulacra being generated. Now, if science is interpreting, we're going to be, this whole paragraph's about this, but, and the next one too. But if science is interpreting its own phantasms, then in what sense is it coming into contact with any phenomenon? Like, the phenomenon is baked into the very concept of what is being interpreted. There are layers to this of presumptions. My video that went out today is about how we do this, and we don't understand that we are building so many presumptions in every single statement. And this is how understanding becomes what it is, and that it's not an easy sort of task and an easy sort of thing to deal with. But like, the whole point is that for this, the phenomenon needs to originate in an objective way, or at least be assumed to be in an objective way, but it also needs to be resisting. Because if it didn't resist encounter, we would not need to interpret it. It would just be the thing that it is. The resistance to interpretation is also built into this. Don't worry. Please.
Yeah. From whom the resistance of interpretation? From whom? Like, when the scientists interpret these phenomena and project Freudian projection, like, from whom this resistance come in the social process, or yeah.
Okay. So just make sure I understand the question. A scientist is doing a thing. He is out interpreting. There is resistance happening. You're asking where the resistance is built from.
Yeah.
The resistance exists in the act itself. And again, I think I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the scientist is not interpreting anything. They're interpreting the phantasms, which are the result of the impulsions that they are experiencing. So it's them.
It's kind of like a theologian from the medieval times, experiencing their impulsion.
Rudd says, so science invents simulacra to have tangible ideas and schema to interact with, to structure semiotics so scientists can function. Yes. Yes. Dan says, so it's like Galileo seeing the moons of Jupiter through a telescope where his contemporaries saw blobs of light. Boy, I would love to spend like an hour breaking that down, because it's actually a very good example. It's at what point, because that's actually a phenomenal. Give me a second to try to reword how you said that, because that's just a really good way. I don't want to just steal it. I don't want to just steal it. The world resists, and things resist being signified. They don't have their own impulsions. You're not doing that. You and I, when I'm sitting here and I'm like feeling things and I'm not communicating, there is a resistance for you to there is resistance to understanding what Brooks is doing or what Brooks means. When I speak, I'm translating my phantasms into simulacra. The simulacra I speak, you then, as you're doing right now, you take in and you go, oh, it's cool. And your impulses directly feed on that to build phantasms, to which you then understand the world and you build simulacra off that. The thing is, because I am not immediately understandable or graspable or known by any of these other simulacra, and I'm no way I could be, certainly not my thoughts. There's a resistance to your understanding that exists inside of this. And again, this is just me trying to explain this. This is really, really fun stuff to talk about. So let's say we have, Brooks is also looking through and he sees blobs, but they're planets is the assumption. Like, we're looking out, we're able to measure the blobs. You can still measure blobs. I turn this many degrees and the blob is there. Oh, fuck. So in this amount of time, the blob moved from here to here. Well, let's add that to the other measurements and figure out how far away blob is. You can kind of do that. I'm oversimplifying, but you can kind of do that. But we start naming them and we know the blobs. At some point, someone has a better lens. So now it's, oh, cool, that's Saturn. We're able to identify, we're able to see it. It's less at that point because we've invented a simulacra of measurements and names and conventions and schema to understand things. Now we've layered that. But now I see something even more clearly. What's that red dot? Because I mean, what's the rings? What's the red dot on Jupiter? What's the crater on the moon? I can see there are still fuzzy things that are resisting understanding. The world doesn't exist to be understood. We have to build our understanding of it through existence and as we go. I like the term anthropomorphic residue as metaphor. I like that a lot too. That's good. Please.
That's a very radical idea. Like we don't understand how we understand. Like we don't know how to understand.
That's literally the name of my video I put out today. That's literally the name of the video. You don't understand how you understand. Yes, that's literally the name of the video.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's one of the things that actually makes it's radical. And this is why I think when we start talking about like why this matters, how we understand the world is one thing, but our knowledge of how we understand is another. And again, it's still utilizing the same thing. I've got my impulses that are shaping my phantasms that I am then interpreting, and I'm doing it through translating of Klossowski, who's doing the same thing through translating Nietzsche's writing. And like, there are layers and layers of simulacra, but the awareness that this is what we're always building and everything is affirmatively constantly building is kind of powerful. And it becomes a thing that once you see it and you're able to start putting it together, it shifts how you view a lot of the ways that our understanding, traditional understanding, I'm putting it in quotes, is abused and taken advantage of. Because again, the way that we have built in right here, and this is like why Foucault loved Klossowski, the interpretation of its phantasms as condition of existence as a means of dominating its power. Its power here in the legislative sense, not the potentius, but potestas sense of things. The power over, the crushing, the domination, not power in terms of I have more energy or whatever. Like power's very bad in English for this reason. But that thing is the deal. And I want to take one more step. We're going to do the next little paragraph, and then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more, because I want to make sure we hit this, because it's good. It's good shit. It's very good shit. Oh, Arachne, fine. Does the scientist see action and reaction as generally temporally displaced to each other or simultaneous? I think that would depend on the scientist and their phantasms. Does that make sense, Arachne? Don't worry. The paragraph, this whole section cleans this up really nicely. I am making a bit of, I hope I'm making some sense. It's a lot. But we'll be getting through a lot today. We'll be getting through a lot. It invents simulacra, science, that conform to these phantasms and always in terms of the same schemes of stable unities. Why do I say that? That constitute every semiotic simulacra through which the human mind does not so much comprehend as mime the behavior of what is foreign to it by nature. All of scientific representation, including its mathematics, is a unit fiction. Every single one of them. Every single one. Every single one of them. Okay? Let's talk about Galileo is actually someone who comes to mind kind of for this. Because Cicero used Galileo to sort of talk about exactly this thing. For Cicero, mathematics tosses a cloth of God. There's a word for it. He covers the ideas, a cloth of ideas, a garb of ideas, some weird shit. But the ideas, science throws it over. Okay, mathematics throws this cloth of ideas over everything, the world that's alive. We then mistake the garment, the clothing it's wearing, for true being. This Husserl's pretty good, worth reading, some good stuff. So we take for objective reality what is actually the method itself, right? It's the same point. This is, there's some things Cicero's doing to get there that are a little different, but that's the idea. We mistake the clothing for the truth. And it's actually a method. It's actually the method of knowledge that builds it. This isn't ideology. This is not that. This is the actually produced method of things that creates this alongside of it. Does that make sense? The phrasing of miming here. The human mind does not so much comprehend as mime the behavior of what is foreign to it by nature. However you feel about mimes, which I have mixed opinions on them. Klossowski, French artist type, not a shock that he's going to talk about mimes. Deleuze did too. The whole point is how a mime works is through the actions without having anything near it. If you've never seen a mime, they're the guys who pretend to be in a box or blowing in the wind or whatever. When none of that's happening, they perform an imitation of a process that they are not within. And that is the mind. The mind, your subjectivity, you as a thing, cannot actually experience this stuff directly. You can't enter the process directly. You do not have that. That is not a thing your brain has. It's not a thing your mind has. It's not a thing your subjectivity has. Miming does not require understanding. Minds can there are very good mimes out there who can fake it so it looks absolutely real in every single way. They can pretend to be animals and they have no access to being a dog. They have no access to being a cat, yet they're able to mime it because they're able to see the surface, they're able to recreate that, and they're able to do that exactly. The relation that Klossowski is assigning here to science and nature is that of mime and animal in that sense. Success of reproduction, and this is you can see a little bit why AI stuff ended up going in this direction, but it's not evidence of comprehension. Miming is not comprehension. Miming is miming, fundamentally. Orchid and the Wasp? No, the Orchid and the Wasp is different. As an example, a lot of people confuse it because in Thousand Plateaus and in Anti-Oedipus, Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari use the example of the orchid that is visually similar to a wasp. So the wasp fucks the orchid and it gets nothing, but the orchid gets pollinated because the wasps are horny and they go bang a bunch of the orchids. That's not willed miming. That's not the creation of miming. It is just that the orchid purely has pieces, figura that are the same. It's not a willed setup. It's in fact a mistake of interpretation almost on the side of the wasp. But it's more about extraction of that than anything. So it's not quite the same thing as the orchid and the wasp. Hey, look, we have 2 comments on YouTube. That's more than I'm used to. That's fine. Good stuff. Does the mind not perform the orchid for the wasp of our perception? No, that's not the setup. It's cute, though. It's a cute line. I like it. But no. To continue, it assimilates the latter, nature, by reconstituting the processes that science, the former, examines at the level of efficacy. Efficacy is such a good word for this one. The orchid isn't actively making decisions. The orchid is just what it is. It's wholly unaware of any processes. It doesn't turn into one or another based on material conditions. That's the DNA of the thing in the location and all that. Very different as a thing. More a statement on the nature of structured semiotics and how we presume the pieces are the whole. Join us for AO next week, where we join and reread the section titled The Whole in Its Parts. So, okay, it assimilates the latter. Efficacy is the thing that matters. Does it work? That's like, does it work? And how well does it work? Does it work? That's the thing that's the only thing that matters here, right? This is one of those, it's worth taking a minute on the translation too. It's one of those weird ways that efficacy in English is a very bland word for what is trying to be evoked here by Klossowski. L'efficace is an older version of this, and it plays into sort of the idea of the theological, the idea of efficacious grace, for example, which is like a huge religious practice and theological debate in certain circles in France. He's specifically playing in a handful of these things. Klossowski was in his early life extremely like part of a handful of religious circles. Like he was a theologian before he was a philosopher. And his writing, I think, carries it forward. It's one of the reasons I think it's really beautiful. But it's sort of playing at all of that. Efficacy is what here produces its effect infallibly. Science examines it at the level of efficacy, at that register, right? These are very, very powerful in this sense. There's a loss in this. It's English. English doesn't carry a lot of this stuff, but that's fine as a thing. But that's the science assimilates. It assimilates the latter. Science assimilates nature by reconstituting the processes that science examines at the level of efficacy. But the latter corresponds to the sempiternal anthropomorphic superstition, according to which the mind cannot tolerate that there be an absence of a reason, if not an intention, at the origin of a phenomenon.
That sounds Kantian.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like Kant.
Well, let me find out, because I've got to figure out what the fuck sempiternal means, which I know I looked up at some point, but I'm just not able to get going. And sempiternal. Endless duration within time. Okay. It's not eternity. Eternity is existence outside of time or without time. It's atemporal as a thing. So if we're saying that a superstition here is a sempiternal anthropomorphic superstition, then it's something that is endlessly recurring within temporality, which probably makes sense given the book is about the eternal return. So the anthropomorphic superstition is eternally ramifying itself. So the efficacy, but the latter corresponds to the sempiternal anthropomorphic, according to which the mind cannot tolerate that there be an absence of a reason, if not intention, the origin of phenomenon. All right, 1 second. Let me reread this. It invents simulacra that conform to these phantasms, simulacra through which the human mind does not so much comprehend as mime the behaviors of nature. It assimilates the latter. What is the latter in that? I was reading it as nature, but that doesn't read. Is it simulacra and phantasms are the former and latter? It simulates the latter. It would have to be phantasms, wouldn't it? Am I nuts here? Anyone? That's a really complex sentence. That's a really complicated sentence. Latter in both cases. First. Sorry, go ahead.
Could you highlight it, and after that we will return to it?
Yeah, I'll leave a highlight up for it. That's fair. I mean, it's actually going to be most of the paragraph. It's actually most of the paragraph. That's. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to see if I can. Pretend I'm the AI singing old guy. Which one? I'll come back to it. It's we're not moving to the next paragraph until I nail this one though, because that's actually a really kind of huge fucking thing to not be able to answer, and I feel very stupid. We'll continue though. The sentence we're on is this last little bit, the sempiternal thing. According to which the mind cannot tolerate that there be an absence of a reason, if not intention, at the origin of phenomena. As we've talked about and sort of built up, the way that the impulses and the from them the phantasms and then simulacra build on each other is from their own particular perspectives. It's like hyper perspectival. Okay. As such, there's a really weird trick that gets played as the domination earlier in this that they talk about as a means of dominating, of appropriating for itself as power over what resistance. It actually, by claiming it, dominates. And in that domination, there's a weird play that happens. The mind itself doesn't have the ability to tolerate an absence of a reason. It's the, I used in the video, I used Weird Al doing the parody of Close Encounters where he's making the big mound, and it's a big mound of mashed potatoes. Like, this means something, that there's a reason for everything at some point. Something has a proper cause. It has a proper setup, if not intention, at the origin of phenomena. That's the claim is not that scientists like secretly believe in purposes. That's not the thing that's happening here. Okay. Because the next paragraph is kind of the continuation. Now, although science, no, what are you doing? No, stop that. Sorry. Now, although science admits in principle that there is no intention at the origin of the process, once it reconstitutes this process, it nonetheless introduces an intention into the process through the very act of reproducing it. The reconstituted process can be reconstituted only through the simulacra of unities, that is, through a calculus that verifies them. Scientists aren't secretly doing this. This is not like a weird interplay where we have a conspiracy of 3 scientists that live in a cave somewhere that do this, right? It is that the act of reconstitution itself has to be, because of its form, teleological. And it doesn't matter what the person reconstructing believes. It's irrelevant. The scientist can be very aware and wholly understand that there's no such thing as like a prime mover. But the act of reconstituting it creates that in the act of reproducing it. right? To reproduce a process, fundamentally, doesn't matter what the process is, you're actually building something that aims towards a moment, an outcome, a measurement. You're selecting means and refusing others, and you are judging success based on predefined goals. That structure fundamentally is the structure of intention. That's what intention is. So by doing a process that has the structure of intention, you don't even know you're smuggling intention back into it, even if the scientist wholly knows that's not the case. So at doctrine, it is expelling the idea of a prime mover, but in practice, in the experiments itself, in the way that we talk about it, in the way papers and more exist, we are reintroducing it at every level. Is this like science and dialogue with proto-science? No, I'm talking about science today. Like, name a fucking scientific paper. It's introducing intention. And there's a reason that people get really fucked up when they read, for example, Darwin, or when they read even Susan Oyama, who I think does a wonderful job of arguing against doing this very thing. People will still read it and understand things as having an intention. Oh, it's the selfish gene. The gene is aware in some capacity, and it's building a thing towards a goal. There's no goal. But that thing that they know, and they're like, no, if you ask Dawkins, no, the gene isn't aware that it's selfish. Well, you called your book The Selfish Gene. Yes, that's just its goal. That's the level of way that this works, fundamentally. So, like, I think that it's a very powerful argument and critique of science. I think at a huge level. Science today interprets itself as being esoteric, hence a lot of science has weird esoteric explanations of their art. That's fair. Yeah. But if a scientist were to hear this and go, oh, no, science, some Redditor, I have no purpose in my science. There's nothing in this. I attribute nothing to the reaction of this versus that. And they can say that wholly sincerely. However, the intention is in the idea of studying cause and effect. This happens because of that, which means that causes this, which means that is the reproduction of intention, again, structurally, fundamentally. Fundamentally, it's the same thing. And this is Heidegger wrote a book on Nietzsche. Do you know who one of the translators was? Klossowski, right? And Heidegger's reading of Nietzsche is really interesting. Again, for a Nazi, it's decidedly some of its very, very not Nazi-like things is the opposite of what he is saying pseudoscience. We're not, no. The opposite of what he's saying. You'd have to be more clear, Mandy. Sorry. Heidegger, when he reads Nietzsche, and his book on Nietzsche is pretty interesting, actually. A lot of this is very similar. It's very hard not to pull this from Nietzsche, to be very frank. Nietzsche writes extensively in the notes, especially in Nachlass and a handful of others. But the thing science does and knowledge does is schematizes chaos to the degree that is practically required. So truth is a fixation on stable forms and recreating stable forms. And so, again, it's the necessary error for life, as we've been talking about it and sort of laying out here. Organelle's Rouillard does a nice job of revealing and mocking the teleological assumption implicit in scientific explanations that claim to be completely removing them. Yeah, Rouillard is like the unsung hero of a lot of these guys. We have a Raymond Rouillard series of readings. If you click around the channel, they're hosted at middle of the fucking goddamn night for me, Sunday morning. But got to tell you, they're all on YouTube and you should absolutely listen. Yeah, I mean, that's the basic. Because when he says the reconstituted process can be reconstituted only through the simulacra of unities, the mechanism is there for this, and it's a fait accompli. It is the nature of the scientific method. You can't compute a continuum of intensities. That's not how it works. In order to calculate, you must first chop everything up and cut everything up into discrete, countable, self-identical units. They must be the same thing, and you must flatten the rest. It's Nietzsche talks about, and it's Deleuze uses this again. It's a great setup for it. The concept of leaves. There's no such thing as leaves. Every leaf is fundamentally a different thing than every other leaf. There's no self-identical leaf. But to talk about how many leaves there are in a tree, we flatten the concept into its most basic shared parts in order to create a singular identity that we can count, that we can do this with. So this thing that is mathematics, that is science, and this abstraction process presupposes the unit fiction that is underlying this very thing, right? Mathematics and science don't discover units. They create them, and it requires them in advance and then uses them to build their own existence. And the calculus that verifies them, which is, it's a hell of an ending sentence, but it is the circularity of this whole thing. I wonder why the book's titled what it is. The unities are the preconditions of calculus, right? And the calculus verifies the unities. So verification is the fiction confirming itself almost through the operation that we built out of the fictions. This is the circularity of knowledge, by the way, and it is very intentional. This is intentional. Rackney says, I kind of think of the standard model discourse as a discourse of simulacra unities. Yes. I believe so. And again, this is not anti-science as a screed, nor anti-unities or any of that. These are useful. Nietzsche agreed they're useful. It's, again, being aware of what they are. And remember, he's been talking about the imitation philosopher and the philosopher. That's why imitation philosophy, is that the bad one? Maybe not. There's a lot of things that are going to be talked through all of this, which is great. Then we'll get into the last line here, and it's at the very bottom. It says, scoot, bring it center. But it is through the simulacrum, calculating the process, that the intention of the knower intervenes, which is one of efficacy. He who knows, or she who knows, it doesn't matter. It's not a gendered thing. It's the person who knows, they who know because of efficacy. The will that animates science is a will to make work. Truth is that which will produces as self-description. It's a genealogy of morals, right? Science is not the opposite of the ascetic ideal. It is just its most recent and most noble form, because ultimately science still rests on faith that truth is out there, right? That truth in science or anything is divine and outside of experience, that nothing is more necessary than truth, blah, 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 blah. Nietzsche fucking apes on this shit for a long fucking time. Like a long fucking time. And there's a big reason for it. Now to go back before we move on, because I want to understand what the fuck ladder is in this. Okay. This reads terribly in English. I think in French this is going to read better, but I'm going to try my best. Simulacra through which the human mind does not so much comprehend as mime the behavior of what is formed by nature. It assimilates the latter only by reconstructing the process. So the latter here would be the behavior of what is formed by nature. The alien process itself, I think. That pairing is contrasted earlier in the sentence to the human mind, and what is foreign to it is the latter. The mind assimilates a foreign thing only by reconstituting it in knowability. Yeah, that makes sense. That would make sense. So then the second one is the latter corresponds, reconstructing the processes that science examines at the level of efficacy, but the latter corresponds to the sempiternal. That's not really a sentence of two things, but in the French it is. In the French, it's reading that efficacy is opposed to process. Reconstituting the processes that science examines at the level of efficacy, but it's a process. Okay, processes can't correspond to superstitions. That's not a way that this works. Not in anything he's written so far, so we can toss that out. But criteria can correspond to superstitions. And that's what he says, is the reconstitution for efficacy smuggles intention back in. Okay, so that's what it means. But it's in French, it's kind of interesting because it's not the latter. It's because in the French, the gender is part of the language. So you actually can see directly. You can just read directly who they're aiming at. And it's actually, it swaps. Each one means something different. But it's also set denier. It's this last one, it's not the latter. This last one, which makes it really clear that it's literally the last one. That's really clear. Sédinier. Yeah. Klossowski's writing, and if you ever have a temptation to learn French, Klossowski is one of the people to do it for. Deleuze's writing in French is, I think, more clear just generally. I think there's translation issues, but I think mostly it's fine. Klossowski's writing, because again, as I mentioned, he started his work almost as he was a theologian. He for a long time. And so his writing is much more akin to what we would call sort of, I don't know if this is a phrase. This is not an academic thing. It's the thing I've experienced. People who are like steeped in religion for a huge amount of their time, their language, I wouldn't say flowery, but describes things in a consistently observant way rather than very matter of fact. And it's like if you read Peggy, for example, or Peggy, P-E-G, Peggy, the religion comes through because it's just a very consecrating act of writing for him. And I think Klossowski has that too. But that's just my opinion. Whatever. No one cares. I know. That's fine. All right. Show the YouTubers my GIF. I'm not going to show the YouTubers your GIF. Does the criterion of efficacy protect itself from its own transformation? No. It's a criterion in judgment, which means it's very contingent. Dan says, I think this analysis applies to any attempt to understand something beyond direct human perception, whether we want to call it science, pseudoscience, or theology. It's arguing that we always understand terms. Yes, Dan is, that's absolutely the case here. That's absolutely, this is not a polemic about science. This is utilizing science to talk about how understanding works, because it's a really great way to sort of have that conversation. But it doesn't matter if you want to talk about pseudoscience, or you want to talk about poetry, or you want to talk about the day-to-day lives of people. There's a circularity. There's a circularity in all of it. Please go for it.
When you said that there's a simple eternal like circularity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like like this kind of like revolve around the understanding of things, right? So sometimes like on AI, for example, I witnessed this phenomena in AI, right? And I'm still repeating this idea of AI, but like it's repeating the same thing, right? The same phrases and the same kind of like marketing scheme. These scientists that we view like computer scientists, let's call them at that, who kind of like repeating the same thing, right? Or having their own intentions. So that's what I understand from it, right? Like their interpretation, Peter Thiel interpretation. Adam Sams, or I don't know, ChatGPT, like their interpretation of it, right? Like not us, right? Theirs, I guess. That's the what I understand from it.
Well, it's there's a reason I have the video. The video today is about how AI, I believe at this point, how AI is able to do its illusion, and I do use that term very specifically because it's like a magic trick, and how it works and how it does its thing is because we have an understanding of how we come to understand that is about us grabbing and putting the right words on things, and that we're doing the meaning, and it's just one act. But the reality is meaning is something that is created contingently in the moment as things come together in the coextension of symbols of specifically, if I want to be really, really specific, in the way of expression meeting content, the meaning of a thing meeting the way it is being expressed. Right now, it's words for me, spoken aloud, sound noises through your phone. It could be letters or parts of letters on a page or pixels or whatever it is. These things are coextensively coming together with the meaning that was already generated a moment ago and will be generated in a moment and constantly evolving and going. AI doesn't have content. It only has expression, but you have content. And so as the words are shown to you, you're literally basically watching your inner monologue be developed. And you're assigning that content to the expression the same way you would do if you had written words, because it's the same process ultimately. But not to go too much into my video, that's why I did the video. I do want to keep moving on this as much as I can. But we can talk after the stream maybe, and go through it there. To continue. The simulacrum of the calculus wills the calculator to become the simulated author of the reconstituted process. The intellect, introduced as the consciousness of the unconscious phenomenon, simulates the intention, which was previously absent from the phenomenon. There is so much here that's literally about what you were just talking about too. Simulacrum of the calculus wills the calculator to become the simulated author of the reconstituted process. The simulacrum is the subject of the verb wills. The calculator is the object here. Grammar is important in this, and this carries from the French. Agency has been transferred here from person to artifact, machine, tool, the calculator. The simulacrum of the calculus wills the calculator to become the simulated author of the reconstituted process. This is the point of the self here, the vicious circle, right? The self is an effect of impulses. Simulacra, once they are produced, exert constraint backwards on their producers. So the person is a way station for the forces being made. It is not the origin of the forces themselves. Yes. He talks about this. We went through this a little bit. He talked about the code of everyday signs, the way that I speak and I use words and you understand them. It's the code of everyday signs. And in this, he talked about where the singular case, the unique one-off edge case where there is no meaning set up, the feeling you have has no meaning, right? But it must use the code of everyday signs. And that disciplines the singular case that used it. I talk about people mistake and think children have simple emotions. They don't. They have the same fucking emotions as all of us, but they don't have the words for it. So what instead they get is they get this weird nightmare of having the complexity, but they don't have the breadth of options in order to pull from to speak through the genuine malaise they may have at the episode of My Little Pony that they watched. Like, that's not a thing. So we say, oh, are you sad? Are you mad? Are you tired? Are you hungry? This very simple thing we do is this. This is the singular case, the unique combination of whatever it is that child is, needs to learn to use the code of everyday signs. This disciplines that set that used it. Okay? The simulacrum of the calculus wills the calculator to become the simulated author of the reconstituted process. In reconstituting the process, and this is like almost a theological joke being played here, but it's a very serious line. It's a very serious line. As much as it is a joke, it's intended to be 100% serious. The scientist basically is taking the position of the creator of a process. They are a demiurge themselves. They are an author of the world. But they're only that in terms of being a simulated author. Right? A simulated author of it. The willing of the calculator, whether it's the person doing the calculating or the movement of it to the machine that does it, that science is staging a parody of creation. And the one doing the experiment is placed in the position of God. That's it. That's it. They're just position of God straight up.
So they are like priests. I
Yes.
don't know.
Nietzsche has said that explicitly. So yes, I think we can infer that again. The science is the noblest of the ascetic religions, is I think his phrasing, which is not a compliment for Nietzsche. Sort of is, but it's a really backhanded compliment. So Klossowski continues. We're still not even done. That's just the fucking intro. The intellect, introduced as the consciousness of the unconscious phenomena, simulates the intention, which was previously absent from the phenomenon. Okay. Klossowski is being very particular about what he wants us to take from this reading. If we were to say, oh, intention is absent and is now added, you've decided there's a before, that there's a time that was before this thing, that there was a determinate state of being not now before. Okay. Previously is doing a lot. It's scare quotes for a reason. It's previously absent from the phenomenon. It only exists inside the operation that installed it. The before state as a thing is itself the reconstituting being posited retroactively. Does that make sense? Or Agni says, like Dawkins. Dawkins is in my new video. I was very happy to find those clips of him and use them in a very good way. I love Dawkins. He is a fantastic bad example. But does this make sense so far? Doing okay? All right. I'm going to assume that's a big fucking gigantic yes. And yes, Jimbo, I missed your earlier message, but the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Yes. So let's keep going. This is a 2-pager, so we'll be bouncing back and forth. The application of the laws of the process of a phenomenon thus accounts for the liberating function of efficacy. Efficacy assumes that the human being, rather than merging with the process it analyzes, does not preserve them in itself as so many phantasms, but instead externalizes them under the pretext of utilizing them. It thereby creates a sphere of extra-human objects, not so much in order to exploit them for its own well-being and material security, but in order to verify its reason and guarantee its psychic and moral security. That's a good fucking paragraph, by the way. All right. The application of the laws of the process of phenomenon thus accounts for the liberating function of efficacy. Okay. Laws, potestas, rules. Nature has a conformity to law that is not fact at all for Nietzsche. This is beyond good and evil, early beyond good and evil, but is instead interpretation. Nature's conformity to the laws of nature is in the act of interpreting it. And it's a democratic process. It's a projection. It's an evocation of egalitarian politics onto physics and biology and et cetera, chemistry and all of these things. And he says very cleanly, and if you want to talk about things that came like alchemy and all the other stuff that existed, this is actually where Nietzsche sort of talks about this. He's like, someone could come along who read exactly the same things into, I can't remember exactly what the thing was he was talking about, but it doesn't matter. Any scientific thing is, oh, it's this egalitarian view. Someone else could come along and be like a tyrannical fuck, or in a world that only tyrannical fucks live in, and see the same thing as tyrannical fuckery, as a ruthless enforcement of power. They would arrive at the same conclusions with opposite means or understandings of it. And both of them are still interpretations. And people will still object. This is, this lawful way of reading things is bad philology. Everything is interpretation. And by the way, the idea of saying this is also interpretation. This is all bad, stupid shit. This is like dumb shit. Nietzsche would basically be saying, yeah, it's all dumb shit, more or less. I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but still. But Klossowski's taking this and running with it. The application of laws in the process of phenomenon accounts for the liberating function of efficacy. Efficacy liberates. What is it liberating? Well, it liberates us as detachment. It liberates us from having to be part of the process. That's what efficacy does. We aren't part of it. We separate ourselves from it. We're able to be detached. And that's why he continues and he says, efficacy assumes that the human being, rather than merging with the process it analyzes, does not preserve them in itself as so many phantasms, but instead externalizes them under the pretext of utilizing them. That's the argument, more or less, he's been making for a little bit here. A process exists that you're examining. You can merge with it. You can retain that process as phantasm. It would stay inside within you, part of you. It would be an intensity. It would be without exteriorized anything. It would not be made communicable. It would not be translated. Things would not be lost. It would be that. This would be for Nietzsche, the Dionysian. This would be the route of the artist. And Nietzsche, in the end, you might say as well, where he was fully simulating Dionysus and the crucified in his later letters. Klossowski will get into that. Don't worry. But that's one way. The other way is to externalize it. That is the function of efficacy. It externalizes. It turns the process into this stuff right here. I'm looking at it. It's right here. It's cool. This is the stuff. Look at this stuff. I'm not part of this. You're holding it. You're part of it. No, I only built the machine, selected everything, put things in place, and made sure everything was exactly in line with how I wanted. I have nothing to do with this stuff. That's what it lets us do. Efficacy is that second thing. And there's a really, the reason I made that sarcastic joke is because the whole point is it's the pretext of utilizing these things, right? That's the stated reason isn't the operative reason. Utility, the use value of the thing is an alibi that I'm able to use to get away with. I wonder if there's another motive. Oh, wait, that's right. I'm going to read the rest of it, but we're going to stay right on this page. It thereby creates a sphere of extra human objects, not so much in order to exploit them for its own well-being and material security, but in order to verify its reason and guarantee its psychic and moral security. And this is like the big major critique to sort of close out this idea. We'll get to the next page when we get to those words, but I want to start basically here. If a process can be retained inside as phantasm, it is threatening the coherence of whoever is retaining it. It will become obsession. That's why we call the phantasms obsessional images. That's why he uses this terminology a lot. It'll become delirium. It'll become possession. It'll become dissolution of the identity of the person. But if we externalize it, pop it out, separate it from us, put it here, it can be handled at arm's length and it won't contaminate identity. Objectification is psychic and moral personal defense. It has use, by the way. This is not shitting on objectification. It's making a claim about it. This is not saying we should not objectify. Trust me, he's really not saying that. This is, again, like, don't do that. I know I'm making up because I know I've had these people, and this is not him saying objectification is bad. Don't do that anymore. Please don't read that this way. Please. I know you will. Someone will.
It's remind me of Henry Bergson, right?
Yes.
When he stated that we kind of like, in terms of time, we still don't understand time because we attribute to it a spatially kind of a spatial attribute to it. And still some of when I debate conservatives, I debate them on time, and they still view general relativity as that, right? Like
Yes.
like the idea of Einstein, like. So I think yeah. I think
well,
like
it's because
I
it was.
what,
To be fair, the reason is because it's efficacious. Like I think that's the easiest way to say it. The reason that you go that direction is because it allows these concepts and these things to have this externalized thing that you don't then have to carry as an obsessional, problematic, and very, very much time is one of those things. You can look into people who've really tried to dive into it. It is hilarious, depressing. It ends up like the movie Pi for a lot of people. Because again, that externalization, that objectification gives room to create until we can do more and we can objectify more and create more, because the creation of this extra human set of objects, the sphere of extra human objects, not so much in order to exploit them for its own well-being, but in order, and that's the phrasing that really matters. And we'll just go to the next page, because the sphere is made to verify its reason and guarantee its psychic and moral security, which I love as a phrasing. It's a really interesting, I think it's an interesting setup. Verifying reason, for example. Reason as a thing, the smoke is unbelievable here. I don't know where everyone else is, but Jesus Christ, the smoke is unbelievable here. Lots of forest fires. The way reason functions is that it needs an external confirmation that it is reason. It may be circular, it doesn't fucking matter, but it needs to be connected to something and not simply madness. The object world that you inhabit is that mirror in which reason is checking that it is sane. If it's not there, it's a bad day. And basically this book is organized around Nietzsche's own mental collapse. So I'm not making a light joke as a thing. Don't American pragmatists valorize efficacy without externalization? I would be fascinated. I mean, I think they say that, but I don't know if they do that. Dan says, you said objectification is a method of protecting the subject from contamination by the object. I was thinking of it more as a method of protecting the object from accusations of subjectivity. Well, I explained that after I typed it. God damn it. As I'm reading it too, you cross it out and well, I'm glad I explained it. Damn it. I love that. So verifying reason is important for reason, because then reason knows its reason. But logic is its own set of rules. This is one of those things, like logical fallacies aren't like a grenade you lob at someone. It is to know whether or not you are building a coherent logical system, which you should want to do, because logic only has itself. If it's ever not connected to other logical things, it is circular. It's always circular in the end, but it's reason, justifying reason. Otherwise, it's not. This is a bad day. The other thing is the way the reality principle functions, which we've gone over, right? A lot. In last week, we touched into it a little bit this week, but that's like the big thing. This is the reality principle as Klossowski's using it is not simply Freud's, development of human reason and capacity. The reality principle guides us. No. Klossowski's like, no, this is institutional, herd level, gregarious constructs of shit and built in the code of everyday science. So science, and his wording, is essentially an institutional principle dictated by reasons of security and for the gregarious continuity of existence. And he's being very, very particular here.
Could you explain what is the herd in Nietzsche kind of terms?
People, humanity,
okay.
The human race, or whatever you consider that, the you that you belong to at the gregarious at-large level. No man is an island kind of thing. Even if they think they're an island, then they're an island of men. They belong to the gregarious herd of island men, I guess. And usually libertarians, and also weirdly 9-year-old girls. I don't know why that always follows. It's very strange. Libertarians are an odd cat. I do want to finish this section because we've got just 2 more paragraphs. And I want to get through them because it closes out a really nice point that I think is pretty important. Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. I'm just reading, making sure I'm not missing anything. Yet science in no way wishes to acknowledge that the species might itself be increasingly monopolized as an object by this initially extrahuman sphere, to the detriment of its psychic and moral security. For a long time already, there has been an absolute discordance between the reality principle, of which science believes itself to be the guardian, and a completely different impulse that acts within science and attacks the very notion of security. Okay. Let's jump right through. Yet science in no way wishes to acknowledge that the species might itself be increasingly monopolized as an object by this initially extra-human affair to the detriment of its psychic and moral security. Bit of a turnaround, right? The object world is not really there for wealth. It's not really there for comfort. It is more or less psychic triage quarantine. Externalizing phantasms as objects, great. You no longer have to undergo the phantasm. You no longer have to undergo that. You've defined it, you've moved it out of yourself, and you're able to continue. That's this sphere of extra-human things being built. But the problem is the structure of what we've built and what it is not neutral. The quarantine failed. And it failed basically in exactly the way we hoped it didn't, because it has annexed the one building it. The gregarious, the herd, the species has built a world of objects. We have built a world of objects that have been designed to keep us intact in the world, understanding the world, and able to grasp it, and able to say that there is at least, if not a full foundational grounding, I'm able to say I'm within a network of meaning that I'm able to position myself against, like a ship at sea. That thing that I've got is great. But now the species is an object that we have taken. Biology, medicine, statistics, psychiatry, genetics, whatever. Every one of these turns the instrument of objectification back onto the thing that created it and worked with it and built it. So we are now somehow inside of the extra-human sphere that was built by the processes we made, examined by the same procedures that we invented to examine things that were foreign to us. Okay? And this is to the detriment of our psychic and moral security. This is the detriment of exactly the thing the sphere is for. Like fundamentally, where this failed. Okay. For a long time already, there has been an absolute discordance between the reality principle, of which science believes itself to be the guardian, and a completely different impulse that acts within science and attacks the very notion of security. We've been building up towards a coinciding moment. Okay. The scientist and what we'd been discussing, the imposter philosopher, remember, they do structurally the same thing. And it was really tough to distinguish them, since we had kind of gone out of the way of disqualifying the idea of intention fundamentally. Like, it doesn't matter. Intention's stupid. Who gives a shit? That's after the fact anyway. It doesn't build. It's not, there's no before. So what the fuck? So what's the distinction? Well, it's not intention. It is the split within science itself, because science is not one thing that serves a single impulse. Oh, multiple impulses use it. Two that we're naming here, more or less. Two that are being specified, I think I would probably phrase here. Less being named, but like impulses that are being specified, right? And these impulses have things in opposition to each other, drives in opposition to each other. They're pushing in different ways. They want opposite things. probably too anthropomorphic, but generally speaking, they're driving at different shit. On the one hand, we have the gregarious impulse, the species preserving impulse, right? And that wants the reality principle maintained. We want to know we are all together and we are all in this and we all share the same world. And I know where I am, you know where you are. Stable objects, stable people, stable species, stable planet, stable security. There's another impulse, though. And it is something that uses that same apparatus to attack security itself. Okay? This is not about whether or not people intend things. Impulses use institutions and people without those institutions or people knowing it. It doesn't matter. Belief is irrelevant for this. Right? Like it's the opposite of that. The reality principle, as Klossowski's been using it, and again, it's not exactly Freud's, it's sort of playing with it. It's instead playing with that thing at large. The reality principle of how we sort of understand ourselves, and we understand ourselves at large socially. That's the thing. There's something different happening here, something else attacking. But we're going to keep reading because I'm going to do one sentence at a time. If the human being mimes the natural phenomena it analyzes by means of simulacra that allow it to reconstitute these phenomena, it is because in the simulacrum there is a force that refuses to tolerate the durable fixity of the species. Remember, the mind, you don't so much understand or comprehend. Instead, you mime. Your mind mimes the behavior of that which is foreign to it because it can't embrace it fully. Right? Act through is better. Act through is better than uses. Yeah, fair. Then let me restate that. Drives and impulses act through institutions and people. They are part of the processes. Yes, it's much better. Thank you very much, Gert split with a something. I don't know. I'm American. We don't do symbols or language. When he says mime earlier, it was like the mind mimes. It's kind of an odd language, but here this is like the driving home of it, right? The difference between representing something and miming is that representation, the word is very important. Representation leaves the person representing it unchanged. But mimicry does not leave someone unchanged. A photograph of an animal doesn't change the camera, right? If I say the word dog, great, I said the word dog. But someone who is a miming a dog, fundamentally must deform their body into the shape of something that is not themselves. It isn't the other thing, but it is not itself. Imitation is paid for in the form of the imitator. So, if knowing is miming, then every act of scientific reconstitution that exists is an act in which the human is taking on the form of the non-human. Science, and this is not just science, we're just picking on science because it's the most clear version of this. What's an unk? Oh, excellent. It's just the most clear version of this, science. Science mimes nature. When it mimes nature, it unfixes the human. Removes the fixity of it. Now, this is not a side effect of discoveries. It's not just the discovery then causes this, goes blah, blah, blah. It is in the operant way that the discovery happens, because we are reconstituting nature. We mime it. The species cannot mime what is foreign to it and remain fixed. Okay? This is the big deal here. In the simulacrum, there is a force that refuses to tolerate the durable fixity of the species. The force is in the simulacrum. It's not in the scientist. It's not within a human being. The artifact is the thing carrying the force, because that's the job of the simulacrum. Do you remember Roman? I mentioned like the gods would show up and like hang out in the simulacrum. Were meant to be like vehicles they could come and say hi to us in. That's what the statues were for. It's a simulacrum. In them there is force. So, all of this that we've been reading, there's a bunch of these lines, but it's saying that all of this is refusing to tolerate the durable fixity of the species. Durable fixity is a fucking hell of a complicated way to do this, and it's not easier in the French. Fixime. There was an idea that the fixity of a thing, and this is pre-Darwin. It's really pre-Darwin, but it's the idea that a species is the species, and it's immutable, right? And that specific thing, fixity, is stability, immutability, that the thing is going to be the thing. Earlier talking about the fixity of signs, and Klossowski talks about how it simulates the resistance of environments or institutions, simulates the resistance of institutions. The way signs have a fixity simulates that resistance. So the fixity of the species and the fixity of the sign, this is the same fixity, right? This is operating at the same point. This is why when we talk about an operation on signs, a simulacrum production, it's why it can be an operation on the species. The weld we just did there is what makes the leap from epistemology to that which we're talking about here, and makes that move possible. And it's extremely load bearing as we move forward. And he continues. It's an ounce symbol. See, now I'm just too stupid. Sorry, I'm too stupid. Through the detour of science and art, humanity has already rebelled against this fixity many times, and thus is by no means simply concerned with its own specific conservation. I'm actually going to leave that, but we're only doing that sentence. It ends at conservation. I went too far. Science and art are not a direct route to rebellion. Through the detour of science and art, humanity has already rebelled against this fixity many times. Thus is by no means simply concerned with its own specific conservation. There's a detour here. Through this detour, because it's not a direct route to rebellion or change or any of it. These are indirect routes. They're fundamentally indirect. The rebellion happens through science and art, without rebellion being the purpose of science and art. Usually it's actually, they're doing something entirely different and they're focused on something else. And we're aware of it. It's almost ancillary or incidental. This is a general genealogical logic as a thing. This is like, again, super Nietzsche, but I think carries forward kind of nicely. The use of a thing is never its origin. It's certainly not true in genetics. Susan Oyama, read Susan Oyama, read Susan Oyama. we don't have an eye because people wanted to see. That's fuck. I hate everybody. Like we don't have a nose because things needed to smell. That's not the setup. But that just isn't only genetics. That's institutional as well. The function of an institution is not the intention of the institution, and we conflate them a lot. The purpose of a thing. This is a genealogy of morals, basically. All of the second book of that, I think. The purpose of a thing is a sign of the will to power that has mastered it. Foucault loves this shit, by the way. The whole history of a thing is a chain of ever new interpretations whose causes need to be connected. Okay. Sense is not the cause of sense. No. Correct. Deleuze is a mime. I think he'd be very happy to hear you say that. If you haven't read Logic of Sense, he does an entire thing on mimes and quite loves clowns, old school clowns, or the kind of thing you'd see at like Cirque du Soleil, not like Bobo the fucking clown. Like the clownish behavior, like that thing, what that means. Yeah, very much. Deleuze would love that. So we've rebelled against this fixity, and thus by no means simply concerned with its own specific conservation. The conservation pertaining to the species. That's specific. It's conservation of the species. Conservation of the species. That's not what it's simply concerned with. That's not the deal. Right? The historical record of science and art, more or less. The fact that species building instruments unfix the species itself demonstrates that the species is actually not really primarily self-conserving. No species really is as a thing. But that's Klossowski's carrying this out through Nietzsche, right? Klossowski's making an argument here culturally. Physiologically, this was very much Nietzsche's play in Genealogy of Morals, like straight up. And it's really good. I think it's really great. And then we can actually get to the end here. Yay. And then we'll be moving next week. We'll be moving to the next part. The next thing is an intro to a huge bunch of Nietzsche shit that we'll be going through next week. But I've got to do a lot of prep for it because it's stuff that I'm not as clean on today. So we're going to be stopping after this paragraph finishes, just letting you all know. But for now, and this capacity notwithstanding, the gregarious impulse has made this rupture fail in and through science. In and through. In and through. The gregarious argument, the gregarious impulse, the gregarious play here doesn't forbid a rupture. Not from the outside. It doesn't have a censor. There's no inquisition in the gregarious impulse. There's no ban on things. It makes the rupture fail inside science by means of science, in and through. Science is the site of the attempted break and the instrument of containment. You want to really see some really clean Deleuze shit, it's right here. Like this is, and Guattari too. Like this is the revolutionary side of this is really on the edge here. I fucking love it. Like this is razor's edge. Like it's the thing, because when you're talking about like in Genealogy of Morals, book 3, the ascetic ideal. And when he starts going through that, Nietzsche starts going through that. The whole point is that science is not an antagonist of the ascetic ideal. As I said, it's its noblest, its most recent form, because it rests on faith of truth. Truth is divine. Truth is something we can seek out like the Holy Grail. That's truth is divine. If you ever use, I'm seeking the truth, like the way that Indiana Jones sought the Temple of Doom, you're not in a space of like pure simple science. You be aware of that. A lot of these guys talk like this and they believe this way absolutely in every way. So every apparent revolt of science against this ideal, this aesthetic ideal that's we're going to have 3D printers so everyone can print everything all the time. Oh, we're going to have this amazing movement in genetically modified grain that will save so many people's lives. Like every time science makes the promise that we're going to be able to get around this or get away from this aesthetic ideal that is in place within us, it's actually no, that ideal is now just operating through science. And that's it. That's Nietzsche's argument. It's the same thing. Marx didn't, I don't think he stole it from Nietzsche, but Marx very much saw the same thing. This is very Marxy. The automated loom is not evil, but it also doesn't solve everything. It's techno like fetishism, the idea that technology is going to be there to fix us, right?
AI doesn't solve everything.
Yeah, no, technology never will, because it is operating and running the same machinery as the aesthetic ideal itself. And this is where the gregarious impulse comes in. But it's also, and this is why it's important in this book, the code of everyday signs, the way we very much just talk to each other, the code of everyday signs. Remember, the singular case, the one that stands out against the rest, must use the code of everyday signs to turn their phantasm into something communicable. In that code, in making their phantasm intelligible to others, they are inverting it. They are falsifying it. They're fucking with it. Smith quotes Klossowski, a great line in the intro here. How can one give an account of an irreducible depth of sensibility except by acts that betray it? That's such a fucking good line. That's genuinely like, I'm going to put it into chat on here and YouTube, because it's just that good of a fucking line. It's what a tragic thing. It's from Sod, My Neighbor. The philosopher villain, we're talking about the philosopher imposter here, but the philosopher villain exists for him as well. And, Sod and his relation to the demonstration of reason is the center of that. How can one give an account of an irreducible depth of sensibility except by acts that betray it? It's like poetry. So this is going to be a huge deal as we go. We're talking about language, how language functions, the code of everyday science, how science and even Sodian reason applies. Because in every case that we're talking about, the instrument of the break is the instrument of containment, of capture. The pessimism is palpable and I think powerful. Remember that this is something the rebellions happen many times. We just talked about, right? And it fails every time. Always fails. It's failing by this mechanism. So the history of science and art is a history of basically identical, repeatedly aborted ruptures of the aesthetic, of the gregarious. Can sense only be known through betrayal? That's a fucking, write a book. That's a good starting point. Or maybe it's just real quick, one sec, because I just want to get this last line in because this is one of my favorite bits and it follows on. The day human beings learn how to behave as phenomena devoid of intention, for every intention at the level of the human being always implies its own conservation, its continued existence. On that day, a new creature would declare the integrity of existence. It's really good, by the way. This might be the most important, this is like foundational thesis level shit for these fucking guys. Okay. To get here, let's talk about a few movements, okay, that have been made that we've talked through. Science expels intention from nature And it does this at the level of doctrine, right? And then it puts intention back into nature through reconstituting it. So intention enters the phenomenon at the wrong point and is placed there. Then the second bit. The remedy for this is that the human beings learn to behave as phenomena without intention. Intention rightly exits us and leaves us. These are almost in opposition to each other, movements in different directions. And that's the point here, right? The error was pointing intention into nature. The cure for this is to take intention out of the human. Nature has never been intentional. We made it intentional. We placed ourselves then in nature, so we made ourselves intentional. We must unmake it. The symmetry of this is incredibly deliberate throughout this entire passage. Like, it's incredible how he's woven all of this shit together. The writing is so ridiculous. The day the human beings learn how to behave as phenomena devoid of intention. Phenomena is, and it's being conjugated here because of English, but it is intentionally carried over in the French, and it's a lot more clear because we were just talking about phenomenon as that thing that science examined and falsely endowed with intention. Just so you know, it's very clear in the French. These are meant to be like, boop, boop, here's the thing. Here, I'm placing it. So the phenomena we falsely endow with intention. Now we must behave as phenomena devoid of intention. We must become the phenomena before that. The human taking place of the object it was objectifying. We objectified it, then moved ourselves into it. We must move ourselves back out. We must do that. This is the return moment, the switch around. And I love it. And then he's got the, hyphenated parenthetical. I see M dashes. Every intention at the level of human being always implies its own conservation, its continued existence. It's really, it's so good. Organelles, you unmuted, by the way. Intention is structurally self-preserving. This is not because of what any particular intention is aiming at. It doesn't matter in that sense, right? It's because of the form intention has as such. To intend fundamentally first means projecting a future state and orienting oneself towards a future state. Doesn't matter what the future state is. Projecting a future state presupposes that there will be someone like you, or you specifically, to occupy it. It means persisting yourself, forcing yourself, presuming persistence, and pursuing it contiguous with the present. The form of intention is the continuity of the intender as precondition. So, intention is fundamentally gregarious in form, not content. This has a lot of implications. Huge number of them for Nietzsche's philosophy, which I'll get to in a second. I have a lot of notes on that. You cannot escape gregariousness by pursuing the opposition. Anti-Oedipus goes through this. It is very similar to saying, well, I'm not like those guys. I'm not going to be like them at all. I'm going to be the opposite, and that's going to make me so different. But that's not what it does. Instead, it ramifies you. It hardens and concretizes what that thing is in your actions. You are creating yourself in opposition to it. You are building a future that necessitates them. It cannot be anti-gregarious. I'm going to overcome myself. means that I will overcome. You are going to be preserving yourself no matter what. That's any other thing you're saying. I will overcome myself. I'm going to experience ego death. Really? How? Like that kind of, like that becomes the intention built in. The very idea of self-overcoming, the fundamental idea is self-refuting at the level of like concept in every single way, which for Nietzsche is great and really weird. And it's going to be a lot to parse over the next 2 chapters. The Ubermensch, the Overman, Superman, whatever. You can't be intended either. That's the selective doctrine. If a new type, a new human, a new creature here cannot be willed into existence, there are other means that must be found for it. And that's, I think, one of the most hardcore parts of this. On that day, a new creature would declare the integrity of existence. A new creature is such a fucking line. It's such a fucking line. This is theologically loaded. It has to do with creator, creature. This is not like minor shit for Klossowski. I wouldn't put it as that. The created thing. And new creature doesn't carry over the French. And one of the papers I read on this really pointed out, because again, Klossowski having that theological background, the phrase in French is nouvelle creature, which is a very specific line from Corinthians. And again, he was Dominican and then Franciscan novice. He translated Augustine. He translated Tertullian. He never wrote a page prior to his own work in philosophy that we know that was free of this entire language lexicon, right? So I can't imagine it's an accident, and it's really a powerful way to put it, because it is the divine creature, something wholly new, not one that is built by intention, not one that we have created or willed into existence. It is a wholly new creature. Sorry, I'm just going to continue for a second, because that last little bit, and it's why I just love Klossowski's writing so much, would declare the integrity of existence. There's declaration in this book has been used a lot, and it's very particular as the site of the fraud of the simulacrum. So this new creatures act is performed in a medium that is automatically falsifying. And it's a really interesting sort of performative moment, I think, with that line. I think. It means that we're not here to describe a way out of all of this. This would mean that the new creature is declaring this illusion knowingly, without intention. And I love that language around this. I love that language around this. Can I say it again? I fucking love that language, because it plays in a very specific way. And we'll be, again, getting to this as we go, because the whole idea is about the knowingly, the falsifying, the way that this works, especially when we start talking about Nietzsche and his relationship with another philosopher that was, we'll say, less cool. Arachne says, what do you think about this? I feel like a lot of Catholic theologians have really weird and fun takes on knowledge and certainty and understanding, while Protestants are just knowledge fanatics. I mean, a lot of Protestants come from a Calvinist background and they don't even realize it. And so there's a lot of possession in their language versus, and it's why like I always love talking to rabbis about it, because for them it's always about the discourse. The truth is it's God's idea, but I'm here to talk about it, kind of thing. And they will talk with no end and in my experience, not any anger or hate in their heart. If you're having a real discussion, they want to have that. They love that discussion. Catholics is a very different relationship to knowledge. Protestants, Calvinists, all that, very annoying as shit. Klossowski is what Deleuze would be if he was less afraid. Deleuze isn't afraid of theology at all. I don't think. I don't. Deleuze embraces God quite often.
Deleuze mentioned his reference to Islam about the wording, and in chapter 2 about the Muslims who carve like wording. You remember the reference in Anti-Oedipus?
Yes, they write the words and then drink the words, so they have imbibed and taken in the words.
Yeah, because this is a practice that we do in Islam.
ATP was very anti-theology. I mean, all of this is very anti. How would I phrase it? Well, it's all about there is only experience. That is the thing. It's the transcendent versus transcendental. It's anti-transcendent, and a God that is transcendent. Yeah, they're very much against transcendent God. But I'd also argue so are a lot of Jews and Catholics. So, because the transcendent is the fun part. Outside of experience, or can it be one with experience? How do we integrate it? How do we play with it? What does that mean? All of that. It's the Platonic, anti-Platonic. Again, there's ways that all of these things have very different legs. I did my video on religion, and I have to mention Unger's The Religion of the Future, which I highly, highly recommend, because it is a very much an atheist or ish, and I shouldn't call him an atheist, very much non-normative way of viewing religion, I think would be the easy way to have that conversation. So that's probably what I would argue is, but it's worth a discussion for sure.
Deleuze has interesting views about religion, especially when they ask him about Louis Pascal in the video. You remember it, Brooks? When he asked like Pascal, like he has a weird views about Pascal. So like he asked, yeah, he has a very weird, like he said like, it's very wrong to kind of like understand Pascal as kind of like, oh, what's the question of God? It's what it does. The loose question is the mode that religious people kind of like live in, is that a better mode or not? Right? That's the Deleuzian question. And this you can find it in the interview that they did with him. It's an old interview. But like the Deleuzian question is like, is it better like mode to live with people that believe in this kind of thing or not?
I think it would be far too, like, I think a big part of this reading specifically is to sort of do away with questions like that, because just as with when we look at the leaves of a tree and what we're doing is flattening all of the leaves into the same basic shape, which can be anything, because we all are going to have our own opinions on what that lowest common denominator is between all those objects. I'd argue the same is very true of people, because inside all of them have their stunningly beautiful sensibility. And as Klossowski writes, how does one give an account of that sensibility and the depth of it, of your interiority and what it means, except through betraying it? It's the only way. But I'm going to bounce, and I'm going to say thank you all for joining. I'm going to send you over a Gay Science Laboratory. One of Sunday's projects is going to be going live soon. They're doing a react and chill. Head over, say hello, give a sub. Great stuff. We've got a handful of QC people I know that are over there. I join on occasion. Good little project we're trying to figure out how to make grow. So go say hi. Thank all of you on YouTube. As always, if you want to join us live, you're more than welcome to discord.gg/DGQC. If you want to support, you can go streamelements/DGQC/tip or patreon.com/DGQC. $5 a month goes a huge way for me to make sure I can do this more often. But until then, thank you. I'll see you soon enough.